What is going on? Welcome back to the OG Frenchie. In today's video, we are jumping back into the 15-layer Damascus Tom Brown tracker. I am really excited to get right into this. In this episode, we're going to be finishing this knife up. We've already got a lot of the work done, and we're going to be heat treating this thing. We're going to be hand sanding it, etching it, throwing on the handle material, shaping it, sharpening it, and testing it. I'm really curious to see how this blade will perform, and in particular, this area here, what that could be used for, and how it will work. So, it's going to be a doozy. Super doozy. It's going to be a doozy. You crazy. Without further ado, let's fire up the forge and jump right up into this thing. Okay? Let's go.
5 minutes later. $80,000 impressions later.
Alright, so the quench went pretty good. Don't see any cracks or anything that went wrong with it. And it does appear to be good and hard. So we'll go ahead and throw this thing in the oven for two 2-hour cycles at 400 degrees. Upon further inspection, bringing it inside, you can see that we have a slight warp at the tip here. It's kind of cocked over this way. It's not terrible, and I'm hoping that we can fix it. You can kind of pick it up there a little bit as well. So if this ever happens to you, you can try to bend it while it's cooling if you're quick in the quench. I learned my lesson doing that on a blade that I snapped. So anymore, when this happens, I like to bring it into the kitchen and use some angle iron and some metal clamps. And that way we can persuade it back flat as we throw it in the oven. So here's a little bit better shot of it here. You can see the handle is flat and the tip of the blade is good. And we've got a little bit of a crease here in the middle. So by clamping the corners and putting one in the middle, we can hopefully help persuade it during the tempering cycle. And we'll do this a couple of times and then I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. And then that way you know that something like this can be fixed. So here's a shot of it before it goes into the oven. And you can see we're just using the clamps to clamp it to this flat piece of angle iron. All right, so we are out of the temper and we did two 2-hour cycles at 400 degrees. And this is pretty typical for what you might see on a blade like this that's been tempered at that temperature. At least in my experience, you get kind of this straw brownish looking color on some of the lighter steel. Anyway, that went pretty good. And then I also, the last clip, we were looking at the warp. And I told you I would show you what it looks like when it's done. And you can see that the warp is completely out of there. It is back to being perfectly straight. So it's just something to think about, especially if you're new into knife making and you end up with a warp. Don't freak out unless it's horrendous. If it's just slightly warped, I really feel like the best way to fix that is during the temper of using that method. Now that we're there, this is a great time to pull out the hardness testing files. And I've done a video on this before, and most knife makers will know about these. But there again, if you're new to this, these are different files that have been heat treated and hardened to a specific hardness level on the HRC scale. So I like to grab, like, let's say the 60 and start out with that. That is a pretty good, 60 HRC is pretty good for a knife. That's kind of a, I don't know what you would call it, just kind of a run-of-the-mill sort of knife. Like, it's going to be hard enough to hold an edge and cut, but not so hard that it chips. Different blades can be hardened to different levels. For most of the stuff that I do, I try to keep it around 60. At this stage where you still have a lot of the forge scale and oil on it, if you go to try to scratch it, you're going to feel resistance. And a lot of that is due to the buildup of stuff on the top surface. So you can get an inaccurate reading trying to do it this particular way. So what I like to do is first grind away all this decarburized steel, forge scale, leftover oil, and get back down to bare metal, and then test it. So let's go ahead, we'll run over there and do that, and then we'll come back and take a look at the files. Alright, so now that we have the forge scale removed off of this thing and quite a bit more peeled off of there, we're going to start with the 55 HRC file, and we're simply going to run it across the blade, progressively pushing it a little harder, and you can tell that it's really not doing anything. If this 55 HRC file was to bite or dig away metal, then we would know that the blade is softer than 55. So that's a good thing. We'll move on to our next one, which is a 60. And a lot of the times for me, 60 skates, but starts to leave some marks. So let's do this again. It's not really digging per se, and you can tell it's maybe starting to want to bite a little bit. You can see some of the scratches up there. So we know that this particular blade is probably right around 60, maybe a little less, maybe a 59 or a 58, which is still acceptable. The lower on the Rockwell scale you get, the more tough the blade is. It means that it's going to be able to take more abuse and it will be less prone to chipping out. For something like this, where the guy I know will be using it a lot, that's honestly pretty good. So I think we're pretty happy with that. I'll show you the 65. This is definitely going to dig into the material. And I mean, that's just instant. I can feel it biting instantly. So that's a pretty good sign there that we're definitely not to 65. That's how you use these files, and it gives you a pretty accurate ballpark guess as to where you landed. So for this particular blade, I think we're right where we want to be. Okay, so now that we have the blade hanging out in the coffee, darkening up, we are using a drill bit on the handle scales and just drilling some extra holes on the inside of the liner. This is a really cool trick to be able to give the epoxy some more surface area or areas to grip the materials together. I've also used a pigment in the epoxy just in case there's any cracks or voids in the handle material, and that way when you go to look at it, it won't be a clear, shiny look. It'll match the color of the handle scales a little better. Hopefully we won't have any of those, but I like to do it just in case. Well, so much for keeping the tang etched. Kind of goofed that up. But because I goofed it up, I decided, you know what, we'll go ahead and grind it back smooth. There was a couple areas that just weren't lining up correctly, and that happened to me the last time I tried to do this. I think that this would be easier to accomplish if you were going to be using bolts or screws that you could take in and out. But trying to do it with pins is kind of difficult. So, oh well, we're just going to keep going. And right now I'm working on taking the pins back down flat with the scales, and we're pretty much almost there. And then we're going to start shaping this thing out. We're basically going to start by doing a 45-degree angle along the edge on both sides, top and bottom. You know, this is one of those very unique types of knives where it's hard to follow a set of instructions or directions on shaping this thing. It really is a unique handle, and it's probably one that I'm never going to recreate again. So I thought about taking my time and explaining the process of shaping this thing, but in all reality, all I'm really doing is squaring everything up and then rounding it all out so that it feels comfortable in the hand. I do like handles that have some facets or hard lines and curves, and so I'm trying to kind of take that into consideration on this finger choil, really grinding away a lot at the bottom, not only for the look, but also for comfort. All right, now that we've taken the time to knock off all the corners, it's feeling pretty good. But we are ready to start contouring this cross section, putting in this little curve here. This is the drawing that the guy gave me. So in order to do that, we are going to be using this 8-inch contact wheel, and it's about the right amount of curve. So just putting this piece of paper up to the design, you can see that it's got the right kind of curve. So we're going to go ahead and put that into this cross section here. Okay, now that we've taken the time to put our contouring in this way, and it's a little thinner on the belly, we've also got the finger swells up in here, and that makes for a pretty comfortable grip. We're now ready to move on. It's looking pretty good. I'm going to take a little bit of time and use this little needle burr thing and go into the holes to clean those up and make sure that those are nice and smooth. Right now you can kind of feel some of the edges of the holes here, so we're going to clean that up. And then once we do that, we're going to be ready to pretty much wrap it up. We're going to go ahead and etch the spine, and we'll go over how we're going to do that. Then we'll put an edge on this thing and give it a test. Let's get after it. Okay, now that we've taken the time to Dremel these out and get them smooth, you notice I put tape over them, and that is because we're going to try to etch this tang. And what I want to try to do is a technique that I have not tried yet, and that is to use some nail polish. And this is just a clear nail polish, and I'm going to put it all over the wood, and that way it will protect the wood when we go to dunk it down into the ferric chloride and the coffee, because I want to re-etch this tang to get it to look like the rest of the blade. So I'm not sure how this is going to work, but we're going to give it a try because it's something that I haven't done yet, and I want to see what kind of results we can get with it. So the simple idea is that everywhere that you put the nail polish, it's going to protect what's underneath of it and keep it from etching, which makes sense. We want to make sure that all this wood does not get etched. So I'm going to have to be real careful up along the spine here to make sure I just get it on the wood and not the tang. And then that way we'll be able to stick it down into the ferric chloride to etch it. It's dry, we're pretty much ready to dunk it into the ferric chloride. I don't know how well the paper is going to hold up, but we will find out. So here goes nothing. And you can tell just from sitting in there for even 30 seconds or so that it's re-etching the spine, and you can see the layers there, which is awesome. So that's pretty cool. We're going to go ahead and wipe this down and neutralize the acid, and then we're going to try to stick it in some instant coffee to darken it up. Alright, so here we are after the coffee. You can tell that it darkened it up some, which is cool. And more importantly, you can see the different lines or patterns in the tang here. We'll go ahead and finish peeling off this tape, and then we'll get some acetone onto the wood to get the rest of the nail polish off of there. And then we'll give it a quick buff and a once over. Then we'll get this thing sharp, and we'll go ahead and start testing it and see how it performs. Well, this certainly does take a lot more elbow grease than I thought it would, but the acetone does remove the nail polish. You can see I still have a little tiny bit up here. So I guess depending upon what kind of scales you're using, you know, you just have to kind of look for it. Back here, I haven't done this side yet, so you can still see all of it over here. But this side is pretty well nice and cleared off, minus this one little spot. So it definitely requires a lot more scrubbing and acetone than I thought it would. But if you get a napkin nice and damp and get it really saturated in the spot that has the nail polish, it does come off. For what it's worth, I thought I would share it. It does take some time and some elbow grease to get in here and remove it. I think the more saturated your napkin and the wetter the piece you can get with the acetone, the easier it'll come off. So it is doable. It just takes a little bit of time, some patience, and some elbow grease. But for the result that we got, I'd say it was worth it. You know, you can definitely see the tang etched, and that's the look that we were going for. So I would say mission accomplished. All right, so we have made it to the end of the build. Get you some of that right there. This thing turned out wicked cool. I really dig the pattern. It's very bold and it's just really cool. I like how you can see the 15 and 20 here towards the edge, and on the other side you've got that other layer of dark steel running along it with some 15 and 20. And I don't know, I just really dig it. The tang turned out pretty decent for having to go back and re-etch it. I think the process of hitting it with the nail polish on the handle part to basically block the ferric chloride worked out pretty good. I wasn't sure about how the tape was going to behave, but it worked out pretty good as well. And for the most part, I think we made the knife that we set out to make. And that's a really good feeling. Sometimes you just make a knife and you wing it, and whatever it is at the end, it is. This particular one, we set out to make this exact specific knife. And that is a good feeling. And you know, it tested my skills. Some of this was pretty hard to do, especially this area in here. You know, getting it to bevel correctly on this weird round section and sharpening it was quite the chore. But we were able to get it pretty sharp, and I think for the most part this is going to make a great knife for the guy at work. Got a little bit of paper here. I've been just testing the edge in certain spots, making sure that it's nice and sharp, and of course it cuts paper. And I think overall it's going to make a great blade. Now, I did use this section earlier on some different materials. I didn't show very much of that. I think maybe the pencil clip made it in there, but basically just testing it to see if it will shave away wood. He could certainly sharpen a pencil down here, potentially cut some rope or straps, and then he could also use the other two bevels for chopping stuff or sharpening, you know, the point of a stick, or I don't know exactly what he's going to be doing with it, but this thing ought to be able to handle whatever he needs it to do. Really appreciate you guys checking out the video. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. I look forward to continuing on my knife making journey. It just occurred to me I have my shirt on inside out. Yay, go me. Anyway, appreciate you guys hanging out, and we'll catch you in the next